Tech names you know sharply lower just 4 days into the new year. Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, all down big time. Look at those losses there. Yowza, 8% loss on Apple, tried 28% from its 52-week high, breaking below that $100 mark for the first time since August. My next guess, is he bullish? I'm not putting words in his mouth. Maybe his ideas changed overnight. FBR Capital Markets senior tech analyst Dan Ives. Dan, good morning.
Great to be here.
Where's your hard hat?
I mean, yeah, I forgot to bring it, but that's really what you need.
I stole your joke, by the way. That's what you said when you came in.
To be bullish on Apple here, you need the hard hat going, especially going into earnings season. It's really been a perfect storm from China to iPhone production to streaming music stop to the watch. And that's why I think a lot of investors are wondering, are the best days in the rearview mirror, or is this just a massively choppy period you get through and then the stock starts to go higher, going to iPhone 7. We're in that latter camp. But that said, it's a turbulent period. You put on your seatbelts. And right now, the streets, I'd say 75–80% bearish. Numbers continue to come down, and I think that's really where we're sitting going into earnings season.
We haven't seen this many sell-side downgrades, I think, ever in Apple, have we?
Yeah, you'd have to go back about 2 years going into, if you think about that sort of softness before iPhone 6, and it is a bit of a Groundhog Day.
Well, that's what I look at. I mean, valuation is, obviously, you're going to try to help us with that. What is the real number so we can put a right valuation on it? But if I look back, I'm just looking at the 5-year chart of Apple. I mean, this thing's had a 5 and a 6 in front of it quite often, split adjusted. Is that even in the realm of possibility?
I think right now, if you look, I mean, as we've talked about, it's not a growth stock anymore. Now it's almost being treated as a value stock.
2% dividend yield.
With 2% dividend yield, and you look out next year, I mean, worst case, X cash, let's call it 6–7 times X cash in terms of where we're trading our free cash flow. But then it comes down to the street going to give it credit for the $200 billion plus cash. Do they use that for a $100 billion buyback? Is there M&A? And that's really the big question. What does Cook do with the $200 billion cash?
Well, I was going to ask you, what does he do? Do you have any theories on that? But also, I know on Jan 26, they're announcing their latest outlook, their prediction for what iPhone 6s is going to do. Do you think that number is going to be a good one? I mean, presumably, what we're now seeing baked in the expectation that's not going to be a good number.
Yeah, and the New York City cab driver at this point knows that they're probably going to miss numbers, especially from March guidance. I think Street originally was at 58–57 million iPhones. Now it's a whisper. It's probably about 50 million. Wow. I think for the holiday season, I think December is going to be pretty ho-hum in terms of a mid-70 million number. But now it's about how bad is March and June going to be. That's the fear going into earnings in terms of, where numbers and how low they go.
That's a problem with the individual investor because they either gave or received an Apple Watch potentially, and somebody's like, well, I hate this watch. I'm not buying this stock. I've lost a quarter of my money in the stock since the 52-week high, and I got this watch. I can't figure out how to use it.
Dan, other than valuation and sentiment, which we've talked about quite a bit, what are the other catalysts here that will silence the boo birds that are
iPhone 7's the make or break. It all comes down to if you own this, you're owning it into the iPhone 7 product cycle into September. We saw this Groundhog Day 2 years ago. Stock's going to re-rate lower going into this choppy period 6S, demand, inventory clearing out. iPhone 7, in theory, should be a 250 million plus unit number, which would show growth that they're still out there in terms of potential. That's what you're playing for here, as well as the variable in terms of what they do with the cash. Do they finally go off the playbook and make some sizable acquisition? Do they do a $7,500 billion accelerated buyback? These are all the questions.
What would they buy, Dan?
Well, I think in terms of the one that would
they could buy anything.
But in terms of the one that would make the most sense, in terms of strategically, if they're going to go after a big deal, it would be Netflix. I mean, Netflix would be the one that would make the most sense strategically in terms of where they could go. You start going down the list.
That just gave me chills. I kid you not, because I just think about the potential of that, and I know Apple is moving into creating its own content. They bid for the Top Gear
guys. But that's been the problem, is that you look at these negotiations and Ivy and the whole crew. I mean, I think they got over their skis. You have not seen streaming TV come out. That would be sort of the big bang acquisition. Then otherwise, within enterprise, do they go after an Adobe, a Box, do the small acquisitions in virtual reality? But I think that's the big question here, is that Apple, the blooms come off the rose, and everyone's trying to figure out, is this the start of that negative period, or is this light at the end of the tunnel, it's not a trend?
Well, I guess that's, to me, what's new, what you're saying to me. You have to think about time when you're going to buy a falling knife. And The catalyst is September, so you have a long haul here.
Yeah, and then you start to think, does the stock start to get re-rated into February, March? I view this earnings season coming up. This is the period you put the seatbelts on, close the eyes, you see what March guidance is.
Yeah, and hold your nose, too.
And hold your nose.
Dan, good to see you. Dan Ives,
great to be
thank
here.
you so much for being here. Always a terrific conversation. Quick